This is video 2 of a 4-part series. You've already learned how to assemble and disassemble your instrument. Now, we will learn how to maintain the mechanics of the instrument and disinfect it. Then, we will learn how to make beautiful sounds on our mouthpiece. Lastly, we will perform our first notes. I am going to teach you how to maintain and disinfect your instrument. First, just listen. Don't try to maintain yours or disinfect it just yet. That will be next. After you're done playing each day, you can brush out your mouthpiece with your mouthpiece brush. Make sure to apply valve oil every single day. That will keep your valves and pistons moving efficiently. Apply slide grease to your tuning slide and valve slides as needed, but never go more than 2 weeks without greasing them. Store your instrument in a dry and safe place. Do not put food into your instrument. Don't over tighten the valve casing caps either. You need to be able to get into those when it's time to use them. Make sure not to use dangerous chemicals without reading the instructions first. Do not store your books inside of your instrument case or it will bend your second valve casing. Blowing food particles through your instrument is one of the primary causes of instrument malfunction. If you must practice immediately after eating, make sure to brush your teeth before playing. If you're practicing somewhere without a toothbrush, at least rinse your mouth out with water before you play. Snaking the inside of your instrument is important to remove any particles that have settled in there. In order to do this, pull out the main tuning slide completely. This will help to prevent the spread of sediment into the valve casing. Don't set the tuning slide down because you don't want to get any dust or dirt on the inner sleeve of that tuning slide. Instead, just keep it in your hands while you snake your instrument with your other hand. Insert the snake into the lead pipe and push it all the way through. Next, you can snake the lower portion of the opening as well, but do not attempt to get the snake into the valve casing mechanism. Having properly greased slides will allow you to move the slides without the use of excessive force. Excessive force might bend and twist the pipes, which might in turn break the welding of the braces. You don't want that. In a pinch, you can use cork grease if you lost your slide grease. This is what a pulled out main tuning slide looks like. You want to grease the inside rougher part, but you do not need to grease the outside shiny part. This is what the first valve tuning slide looks like when it's pulled out. Again, make sure to grease the rougher inner part, but not the shiny outer part. The same thing goes for the second valve tuning slide, but there's not a lot to pull out there. You'll almost never use that. This is what the third valve tuning slide looks like when it's pulled out. This one is going to be one that you're using on a lot of notes, especially low G and low D. You're going to need to oil the piston part of the valves regularly. I do this every single day, and sometimes more than once a day. In order to do that, unscrew the top cap of one of the 3 valve casings. The order doesn't really matter, but you definitely only want to do it one at a time. When you unscrew the cap of the valve casing, I'm not talking about the pearl top where you put your fingers. I'm talking about the part that's right above the piston. Pull the piston up 3/4 of the way to expose most of the piston and apply 2 to 3 drops of valve oil directly to the piston. Put the piston back into the casing and screw the casing cap back into place until it is finger tight. Lastly, grab the pearl part of the valve key, that's the part where your finger goes, and rotate the whole thing clockwise until it either clicks or stops. Repeat this process for each valve, but make sure to do the valves separately because if you get them mixed up, we're going to have a serious problem. This is what a casing brush looks like. You can use your casing brush to clean out the inside of your valve casings if they have gotten dirty for any reason. In order to do this, we're going to start the same way that we started when we were oiling the pistons, where we unscrew the top and we pull out the piston most of the way. Then, brush the inside of the valve casing with the casing brush. If you want to, you can apply 2 to 3 drops of valve oil to the piston to help get it clean and to help it go in more easily. Put the piston back into the casing and screw the top casing back into place until it's finger tight again. Grasp the pearl at the top where you put your fingers and rotate it again clockwise until it clicks or until it stops. We're going to repeat this process for every valve. If you have been sick or somebody near you has been sick, it is likely that your trumpet has become infected too. The mouthpiece is the most important part to keep clean because it's the part that touches your mouth. If you have a mouthpiece brush, you can clean the inside of your mouthpiece every single time you play. But if you don't have a mouthpiece brush yet, a Q-tip works just fine. Do not try to play right after you have put dangerous chemicals on the mouthpiece. Make sure that you follow the directions on how long you need to wait for it to be clean. You will want to clean any part of the instrument that you've touched with your hands as well. You can use sanitary wipes after waiting the adequate time for the job to be done, and then wipe the whole area with a paper towel to avoid any residue buildup. Some chemicals, like rubbing alcohol, do a great job of killing germs, but it might weaken or remove the lacquer on your instrument, and we don't want that. It's also possible to give your trumpet a bath in a bathtub, but that's a lesson for another day. You can bring the shine back to the outside of your trumpet with a polishing cloth. I do this the morning before every performance to wipe off any of the fingerprints or tarnish that is built up. If you polish it right, it'll look brand new for your performance. Do not store your music book inside of your trumpet case. It will bend your second valve tuning slide. Sometimes there is an open slot for things like cork grease and a pencil, though. If you're really lucky, some trumpets have a special zipper storage compartment on the outside for music books, but otherwise, you're just going to have to use a backpack. In response to the COVID-19 spread, it is extremely important that you wash your hands before you play your instrument because you don't want your instrument to become infected. It is also important to wash your hands after you play your instrument, just in case your instrument was infected, you don't want to get sick. The National Federation of State High School Associations published these findings on June 19th, 2020, as guidance for how long you need to quarantine your instrument regarding the deactivation of the COVID-19 virus on your instrument. For the brass portions of your instrument, it takes up to 5 days for COVID to deactivate when you put it into quarantine. If there are any wooden parts to your case, it will take up to 4 days to deactivate. Any plastic parts of your instrument or case, it will take up to 3 days to put into quarantine for COVID to deactivate. On any strings, COVID takes up to 3 days to deactivate. On any cork portions of your case, it will take up to 2 days to deactivate. All in all, if you suspect that you or somebody near you has become sick, it is best practice right now to put your instrument into quarantine for up to 5 days, just to make sure that COVID is deactivated if it has contacted your instrument. Now that you have heard me talk about maintaining and disinfecting my instrument, we're going to practice together. Now that you've already heard how to maintain and disinfect your instrument on a slideshow, I think that we should try practicing maintaining and disinfecting it together. Since you've already seen how to do it one time, I'm going to move pretty quickly through these different processes, but if you ever feel like you need to pause the video and go back to watch something again or to catch up, that's completely okay too. By far, the most complicated part of maintaining your trumpet is oiling the pistons so that they can move smoothly through your valve casing. Pick up the body of your trumpet, and we're going to unscrew the top cap.
Now, not the pearl where your finger goes, don't unscrew that, but unscrew the top cap of the casing right here. You'll pull it out most of the way, but I don't really see a reason to pull it out the entire way, because then it could fall on the ground and get dust and dirt in it, and you definitely don't want that. It's important also not to unscrew all three of these at the same time, because if you put the wrong piston in the wrong valve casing, your trumpet is not going to play correctly. You can unscrew the top to your valve oil, and you're going to put 2 to 3 drops on the bottom portion of this piston. You can let it go back into the casing and then screw in the valve cap that you previously unscrewed. This last step is very important, otherwise your notes will sound very stuffy. Grab it by the pearl at the top where you do put your fingers and turn it clockwise until it clicks into place. Now that valve is ready to go. You can repeat this process for the other 2 valves as well. Another important part of maintaining the cleanliness of your valve casing and making sure the pistons move very smoothly is using a piston brush. Now, you might need to oil your valves every single day, but this piston brush can just be used as needed if you realize that your valves are feeling a little bit crunchy. We're going to start the same way. We're going to unscrew the top valve casing, pull it out most of the way. This is the step where it starts to be a little bit different. We're going to unscrew the bottom of the casing as well this time. Unscrew it carefully so that it doesn't fall on the ground. You don't want any dirt getting in there. Set it down somewhere flat where it's not going to fall. You've already pulled the piston out so it's out of the way, and now you can just brush the lower 2/3 of the valve casing with your valve casing brush. Once you've done that, you might want to put a few drops of valve oil back on the piston because you may have wiped a lot of the oil out with your valve casing brush. Let it go back in just like before. Tighten the cap at the top just like you did last time. Don't forget to put the bottom cap back on. And again, this last step is very important. You'll need to turn the top pearl until it clicks into place. All set and ready to go. As we discussed in our disassembly video, you're going to want to brush out your mouthpiece. I have my mouthpiece brush here, and you can brush your mouthpiece out after every single time you play if you want to. Insert it, twist it, pull it out. I'm going to want to set this somewhere where it can dry because you don't want it molding in your case. After you finish brushing your mouthpiece, you're going to want to disinfect the mouthpiece too. You don't need to do this every single time you play, but if you want to be safe, you can. You definitely want to do this if you suspect that you have been sick or somebody that you live with has been sick. I have my mouthpiece sanitizer here. You're going to want to read the back of the bottle to know how many seconds it takes for it to do its job. Give it a couple of sprays. Let it sit for the specified time on your particular sanitizer. And afterwards, you're going to want to wipe this off with a paper towel, and that'll do 2 things. First of all, it's going to take the dangerous chemicals off of your mouthpiece, but also what it's going to do is it's going to prevent any residue buildup on your mouthpiece because you don't want that either. Another important part of maintaining your trumpet is making sure that all of the slides have been greased on the inside. You don't need to do this every day, but you don't really want to go more than 2 weeks without doing it either. Basically, anytime that you notice that it becomes difficult to pull out one of these tuning slides, you need to grease it right away. Now, you only want to grease the rough inside looking part, not the outside shiny looking part. There's no reason to grease that. Go ahead and get just a little bit of the slide grease on your finger. It's a little slippery, so you might want to wash your hands afterwards. Apply it directly to the inner slide. Smear it all around. Push it in all the way. Pull it out most of the way. Smear it around one more time. And push it to where your tuning slide should go. You can do this for all of your tuning slides because at some point, they're all going to want to be greased. The second valve, which is the one in the middle, is the one that you'll grease the least frequently because, as you can see, there's very little there to grease and there's not a whole lot of room to pull it out. In truth, most trumpet players never end up pulling this one out. The third valve is the one you'll be using the most because that is where your key ring lives. Push down the valve to let it out and we'll grease that slide as well. You'll notice that the procedure for greasing all of these tuning slides is the same, but when you're greasing the ones that involve the valves, you're going to want to push down the valve so that pressure doesn't build up inside. Another important part of maintaining the trumpet is using your instrument snake to get the crud out of the inside of your pipes. You don't need your mouthpiece on to do this. This is going to be the only time that we take any of our tuning slides all of the way out of our trumpet. You notice that we didn't need to take them out when we greased our slides. You want to set it somewhere where it's not going to collect dust, sand, or dirt. Now that I've pulled that out, I have room to put my instrument slide all the way through. Pops out the other side, pull it back through, and you're done. That's it. It's already done its job. You can also do the underside as well. Push it in until it hits something. Don't try to force it in any further because you don't want your snake going into the actual valve casing. That could mess something up. Pull it back out and it's done. You can snake your entire instrument if you want to, but the majority of the sediment is going to accumulate in the lead pipe and in the bottom pipe below. I almost never have to snake the bell part of my instrument because it's the furthest away from the mouthpiece. Lastly, we should talk about the polish cloth. This polish cloth I definitely use every morning before a performance to make sure that my bell on the inside and the outside is shiny and looking brand new. I can wipe off any of my fingerprints or any of the tarnish that may have accumulated while I was practicing. That way, your instrument is looking as good as new.